is time for another bonus episode of the Virtual Memories Show. Don't worry, the regular weekly episode will be coming out on time. But I came across another Kickstarter by a past guest and wanted to talk to him about it, to make sure we get it out there while the Kickstarter is still active, and again, help promote culture in these benighted times. Actually, I should say talk to them, not talk to him. See, past guest Kyle Cassidy and his partner Trillian Stars are behind this new Kickstarter. And when I pitched them on recording a quick show this weekend, they both jumped on board. So this will be a 3-person talk. Now, their Kickstarter is called This Is Only Earth, My Dear. And it's a book of photos and poems. Specifically, it's got poems by Elizabeth Eleanor Siddall, who was married to Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Lizzie, as Kyle and Trillian call her, was the model for painters in the Pre-Raphaelite circle. She's best known as the model for that Ophelia painting that, as Kyle puts it, every college kid had in his dorm wall. The thing was, Lizzie was a painter herself and a poet, and Kyle and Trillian have decided to bring her poetry back into the light of day with this new Kickstarter project. Now, the main book they're producing for it includes 5 of Lizzie's surviving poems, along with 45 photos of Trillian that Kyle shot in London. There'll also be a chapbook and a zine, and we'll see how ornate those get depending on the stretch goals for this Kickstarter. At the moment I got the email for this one, I mashed the Pledge Now button. The images are absolutely amazing. I'm intrigued by the poems that they excerpted in the write-up for this thing. When I hit up Kyle, he sent me a digital proof of the book. The pictures are just amazing. They capture this real, Lizzie Siddall / Pre-Raphaelite vibe while remaining almost unsettlingly modern. It's a really gorgeous production. And their goal of bringing Lizzie Siddall to a wider audience, that's just right up my alley. So we figured out a time on Saturday, and here we are. Here's part of the description that they give on the Kickstarter site. In 1849, Elizabeth Siddall was the most ordinary girl in Hatton Garden until, almost overnight, she became the most extraordinary woman in Victorian London's exploding art scene. Once overlooked for her gangly features and unfashionable red hair, Siddall rose to prominence as the face of Ophelia in the most famous painting of her time, but rapidly grew weary of being gawked at as the new standard of unconventional beauty. Elizabeth possessed a profound talent for both painting and poetry, and despite her relentless pursuit of artistic recognition, her poetic brilliance was undiscovered at the time of her tragic death at the age of 32, and remains so today. Only a scant 16 poems survive, and these are absent from contemporary anthologies or popular editions. So, on the strength of that, I was all over this one. The Kickstarter for This Is Only Earth, My Dear, runs through the morning of May 4th, 2024. I'll put a link to it in the show and episode notes for this one, but you can find it by going to Kickstarter, search for Kyle Cassidy, or just look in the photo category, because apparently it is the #1 Kickstarter in that part of the part of the website. So enjoy the conversation. Mash the Pledge Now button. Here are quick bios. Here's Kyle's bio from Kickstarter. Kyle Cassidy is an award-winning photographer from Philadelphia. In addition, he's been a contributing editor to Video Maker magazine for more than a decade. In 2007, his documentary photo book, Armed America, Portraits of Gun Owners in Their Homes, was voted one of the 10 best art books by the editors of Amazon. In 2012, he published a book about veterans' body art called War Paint, Tattoo Culture and the Armed Forces. In 2014, photographing the book Geek Knits, he crossed the country photographing geek celebrities modeling knitwear. In 2016, he started photographing librarians, which led to the 2017 book, This Is What a Librarian Looks Like. And he's done a bunch more projects since then, and we talk about them on some other episodes of the show. Now, Trillian Stars is a Philadelphia and New York-based performer whose work on stage and in film includes both classical theater and world premieres. And now, the 2024 Virtual Memories bonus conversation with Trillian Stars and Kyle Cassidy. Tell me about the Kickstarter. How did you... Well, tell me about the Kickstarter before I start asking more follow-up questions.
Do you want to do that, Trillian?
Sure. Yeah, we're very excited because we actually made our initial goal today.
I saw just a few minutes before we started recording.
Yeah. So that's exciting. And so that means that now we can refine it and have stretch goals and really make a beautiful product. But yeah, the Kickstarter is so that we can put out a beautiful hardcover book of 45 images that Kyle and I took when we were in London over the holidays, and that are inspired by the poetry of Elizabeth Siddal. And then in addition, there are going to be 2 smaller volumes of Elizabeth's poems, Elizabeth Siddal's 15 extant poems.
So tell me how you discovered her. I know it's in the afterwards, sort of, that you sent a proof over, but tell me where this project really originated for you.
Yeah, well, I think we both have, Kyle has always been enamored of Elizabeth Siddal as a muse and model, I believe. Is that correct, Kyle?
It's not incorrect.
And I knew of her, but I was never as fascinated by her as a model. But she's most famous for being a Pre-Raphaelite muse, the wife of Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and the model for John Everett Millay's Ophelia, which Kyle has noted probably hangs in most, college dorm rooms in America. Very, very well-known image. And we had the opportunity to apartment sit for a friend in London for basically the better part of a month. And just before we left for London, the exhibit from the Tate Gallery came to Delaware that was focused on the Rossettis, including Elizabeth Siddal and her own artistic output, which I personally knew nothing about. I didn't realize that she was an artist in her own right. And so it was fascinating to go to this exhibit in Wilmington, Delaware, and see very well-known images that we had already known of by Rossetti and Elizabeth Siddal as muse, and then also see her artwork and how they influenced each other. And then as we researched it, and Kyle in particular started reading biographies, he discovered her poems, her poetry, which neither one of us knew anything about. And we just became obsessed with them.
Yeah, her poetry's never been published in a popular edition. And all of the poems that were published, her brother-in-law published while mining Dante Rossetti's papers for book fodder. And he kind of reluctantly, I think, printed these poems of hers because he seemed to be scraping the bottom of the barrel of papers, and he was trying to get another book or 2 out. And he really is not a fan of her or her work. And reading what he says about her when he prints these poems is kind of heartrending, because I think they're amazing. And we found the poems while reading these biographies, and they've not been collected in a popular edition. There's some scholarly editions of them. There was an edition of only 500 copies printed in 1978, and those are all multiple hundreds of dollars now, those copies of it. And people have reprinted them in other biographies, but you can't go to the store and get a pocket edition of the poems of Elizabeth Siddal and stick it in your pocket and, go out to the park and read it. And that seemed like both a dreadful shame and a missed opportunity.
And complementing it with photography?
Yes. Yeah. So we were reading these poems while we were in London, and the poems started to influence the work that we were doing, the photos that we were taking. And we started pairing photos with text, and they seemed to go together really well. And then we just abandoned absolutely everything else we were doing and decided we were just going to make photos that were loosely inspired by her poems. So they're not literal interpretations of poems. They are the scent of perfume after somebody's left a room, So we were reading them a lot, and we're in London where she had lived, and there's I'm going to say a collaboration, but the ghost of old London exists in modern London.
Sure.
And that became a big part of our photography. So we're not trying to hide modern London. It protrudes through in these photos that also have kind of her ghost, in modern London. And I think we did a pretty good job.
The proofs you sent me are just gorgeous, and they're wonderful. And I notice building in the background,
mm-hmm.
And with this amazing setting and lighting in the fore.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little about the collaboration between the two of you and the process of trying to evoke this stuff in terms of visuals? What went into, I guess, the setup of it all, or the imagination of making these images?
Yeah. So we were also, living in London and doing stuff. We weren't just, taking a photo a day. We were going to the museums, and we were going to bars and whatever else. So it was things that were in the, places that were along the way.
Going to the theater on the South Bank, and then seeing the sand bar that goes down into the Thames and being inspired by that. Just, the incongruous nature of, having this very Victorian setting, but with modern London behind us, was incredibly inspiring.
I think it was also a lot of Trillian wearing one dress on top of another dress.
I had wondered about the costuming part when you talk about this being, integrated into your day-to-day lives there, how tough it was, Trillian, for you to, make it exotic or make it, photo worthy.
It was a bit challenging. I think before we left for London, generally when we travel, we will do one major photo shoot, because Kyle's a wonderful photographer and I love being photographed. So when we went to Iceland, I brought a very ornate dress, and we went to a volcano, and so you see the lava flowing behind me, and I'm wearing this incredible dress. So I thought it would be something similar to that maybe we would go to one of the Pre-Raphaelite sites, maybe where William Morris had lived or where the Rossettis had lived, and that we would do one main photo shoot. But then when we got there and we found East London where we were staying, so exciting, and walking along Brick Lane with the gorgeous graffiti and these little alleyways where you could imagine, Lizzie Siddal walking, but then modern London has created this other art form of graffiti and this gorgeous setting. Then we realized, wow, I need some costume changes. And again, being in East London is incredible, because we were in a part of London that is it Bangladeshi? I think it's a large Bangladeshi population, and so there were stalls along Whitechapel Street that sold very inexpensive flowing garments with scarves with this floral embroidery. And so that turned out to be the costumes that I wore, were just from these stalls from East London. So
wow.
it makes it even more unique and very London centric.
And I think the whole photography motif changed after we got there too. We had kind of an idea of what we were going to do when we left, and it was, I don't know, maybe it was more of a joke than anything else. But when we got there and started doing them, they came out really well, and the whole tenor of everything just changed. And the photographs formed themselves, I think, over a couple days of doing it. It just cemented itself into our minds what exactly we were doing, which is not what we thought we were doing when we came out there. So it's a question of you bring your skills and you bring your time and you bring your equipment, and then the plan is met by the environment, and all those things together shape what comes out the other end. So we didn't know exactly the environment when we got there, and it added a lot to the whole plan, I guess.
Do these sorts of projects often change that dramatically for you?
Not really. A lot of time, and it depends what you're doing too. Like a lot of times I go into something, I know exactly what I need, and I come out with that. I sometimes plan very heavily going into places, like knowing exactly where I'm going to be and what I want to do and what time I need to be there. But this one, because it was just for us at the time, and also, this is the first time that I've been on vacation in, I don't know, maybe my adult life.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't know the meaning of that word, but go on.
Exactly.
I'll pretend.
Yeah, so, we didn't have a lot of plans, and I didn't want to spend a lot of time planning. I did make a map of places we wanted to visit, and I think we visited none of them.
We didn't do any of it. Yeah, not at all.
But, when we got there and saw places and had equipment and costumes, it all just came about organically by itself.
Mm-hmm. And it did, I think our collaboration shifted as well, because I do find often, Kyle has a very specific image in his mind when he does a photo shoot. And so in the past, a lot has been like, oh, move your head this way, or, I need you to turn that way, and position your arms just so. And we got to the point in this collaboration where we didn't really need to speak. It was, I understood just through being immersed in that landscape and going to the Tate Gallery and seeing the Pre-Raphaelite paintings, and also looking at the photographs of Jane Morris and seeing how she held her hands and realizing like, oh, Rossetti didn't actually invent those weird hand positions she's doing. There's photographic evidence that she actually had her hands like this. And so that became kind of a fascination for me as a model in how to incorporate some of these amazing, graceful hand gestures that Jane Morris had and that are evidenced in the paintings Rossetti created of Lizzie Siddall and Jane Morris.
I was going to ask, how different is the modeling from acting for you?
It's quite different. I mean, acting when I really do need a character. Sometimes I look at photos of myself and I can see that I felt self-conscious or that I didn't know what my character was. It's just me trying to look natural in front of a camera. So I'm certainly much more comfortable on a stage when I've really, really, had a deep dive into character development and the rehearsal process. So yeah, modeling often, I love it, but it's often trying to make my face look natural or trying to figure out what this person that I'm, who I am in front of the camera, what the most natural pose is. So I do struggle with that a bit.
But Kyle, you cut her some slack, right?
It's interesting that that she says that, because I know that I prefer to work with actors over anybody else.
Yeah.
Because they're used to like listening and then doing, and I find it so much easier to work with actors than with almost anybody else, because they're also like, they realize that it's a collaboration too, and you can tell an actor, I need you to come through that door like you're an FBI agent who's been retired for 5 years, and then I need you to do it 7 times. And they'll just do it, right? Because like that's what they do. So I find as a photographer, that's just very, I don't know, it makes things so much easier for me, because a lot of times in my photography, I'm making up a story that doesn't exist, and I'm making up a movie or a play that has one frame, and actors are really good at being part of that. And I think a lot of the successful photography that I do is photography that tells half of a story.
That's interesting. And I'd ask you a lot more about it, but I'm trying to stick to the Kickstarter this time. Yeah. But I do want to talk to you guys more in depth about this stuff down the line. So I'm going to have to come down to Philadelphia and record a long one with you guys. But tell me, the vibe of her poems, what did you get from that, and how did that really inform, when did it start feeding back into what you were shooting? What was the vibe you were starting to pick up?
I think it was probably, we had done there's a poem that we did under a bridge in Whitechapel where Trillian's leaning up against a wall, and we posted that with a few lines from one of her poems, and the lines are, "Oh, never weep for love that's dead, since love is seldom true, but changes his fashion from blue to red, from brightest red to blue. And love was born to an early death, and is so seldom true." And, that struck me as somebody who has, lived and loved and lost in life as a true experience of someone who's going through something that's very, very real, very understandable, and, an emotionally tragic time. And a lot of people commented on that, and some of them were very angry by it. They're like, she doesn't understand love.
And some knew her history with Rossetti and said he was horrible to her. And it was interesting to see the different perspectives, and those who knew what her relationship was with Rossetti, who was notoriously unfaithful to her. And then others who, thought, oh no, love is wonderful. Like, how dark and brooding she is. And interestingly enough, Rossetti's sister, the famous poet Christina Rossetti, said that these poems were too sad to be published, and which is part of the reason they were never published in Lizzie's lifetime and in Christina Rossetti's lifetime.
Do you get the impression there were more poems, or just that the extant stuff is really all she wrote?
It's hard to say. There are papers that the Ashmolean Library has at Oxford University, and there are some rewrites of some of these poems in there. I haven't seen the papers. And there are some scraps of other stuff. In 1978, the book that came out in 78 has a 16th poem in there, but I'm pretty sure that 16th poem is actually just a discarded stanza from one of the existing poems. So there's stuff, there are some bits of paper and envelopes that have words written on them, and some of them people haven't deciphered. Yeah, the people who've looked at them don't really know what's on it. And there aren't a whole lot of people lining up in the Ashmolean library to look through the notes of Elizabeth Siddal.
And they all, I think she and Rossetti scribbled constantly. So, I'm sure there were notebooks filled with snatches of poems, and the other obstacle really is that her handwriting is very difficult to decipher. So even today, there's some doubt about like what certain words are, like it could be this or it could be that, but it's very, very difficult to read her handwriting.
Right.
She's like a woman after my own heart. So,
like if she was Emily Bronte, then people, would have scratched out every possible poem that, that she'd written.
Yeah.
But she's not Emily Bronte for reasons that I don't understand.
Well, I think part of it is that, she was underestimated in her lifetime by Rossetti's friends.
Yeah.
That's because of jealousy, because they thought, she was usurping his, their place in his life and taking up all of his energy. But it's very, yeah. I mean, you see that today. Like I always think of Yoko Ono, or just the wrath and ire that is directed at her. So yeah, it's interesting.
She's discounted by a lot of his biographers, his contemporary biographers, not mentioned very much in the biographies. And when they do mention her, it's kind of disparaging. And it's like, say, oh, I went over to Dante's house and he didn't want to leave. He just wanted to stay there with Lizzie, and he kept drawing her over and over again. And, he's wasting his time and talent. And it's interesting reading these biographies because, like, I think and if you're an artist, people like that, that couple, and they just don't go out anymore. They just sit home and watch TV by themselves and
write sad poetry.
Right, and write sad poetry or whatever. And you're like, oh, come on out, do the thing, come to the whatever. And they're like, no, we're going to stay home. And so I think that, when they were together, they were homebodies. And I think that bothered a lot of people, his peers, who thought, well, great men need to hang out together and do great things.
Yeah. As opposed to being, happy.
Right. So a lot of her work got buried, not reported on, and, left in boxes and eventually stuffed into a library at Oxford.
Now, in addition to the book, you guys are putting out a chapbook of her. You put in mostly complete poems, mostly as in all 15?
All 15, yeah.
Okay, and not necessarily counting that lost stanza?
Right, I wasn't sure. So I don't know what the provenance of that, the 16th poem is. I don't know if the 16th poem is in the public domain even, because how much editing did the people who put that book out do? I'm not sure.
Oh, sure.
So I thought it best to leave that one. And it's 4 lines long.
Yeah. Mostly complete then. That works.
Yeah, mostly complete. Yeah. There might be another poem or two out there. One of the interesting things about the Rossettis is, they created a lot of stuff. He made hundreds of drawings of her, and there may maybe 2 or 3 dozen that we know of now, but there's stuff scattered all around South London, because he gave these away and traded them for, liquor or whatever. So these things can turn up. So it's entirely possible that somebody who lives somewhere in South London is going to go up in the attic one day, and they're going to find a letter from Elizabeth Siddal that's got 2 poems in it that says, hey, I wrote these. What do you think of them? So entirely possible.
It could be another Kickstarter for you guys.
I want we're going to pay everybody to go up in their attic and look through the boxes.
Now, what have you learned from the other Kickstarter experiences? Has anything fed into how this project works?
Yeah, I have lots of good advice for people.
Because I plan on doing my own later this year for a photography project also, so I'm going to tap your brains for that one later.
Okay, so 4 times a year, somebody emails me and they're like, hey, Kyle, I want to do a photography Kickstarter. And I'm like, oh, that sounds like a great idea. And they're like, I want to, take photos of, I don't know, some my father. I want to take photos of my father and dress him up in 50 different costumes. I'm like, that's a great idea. And then he's like, and I figure we need $75,000. And I'm like, what? It's like I could do that for $800, whatever you want to do. So I think my best advice for Kickstarter is like to have a realistic goal. And when we went into this, we're like, what is the smallest amount that we could do this for? And we came up with that number. And that's like a not luxurious number. That's like the smallest amount we could do. And you hope you do better than that. But I think a lot of people just have ridiculous ideas about, I don't know if it's a ridiculous idea about how expensive something's going to be to do, or a ridiculous idea about, Kickstarter's just free money, and it's not free money, right? You're selling a product, and you have to work for that product too. So you have to have an idea that's worth doing. You have to have an idea that people are going to pay for, and you have to be willing to work to do it. And I think that's probably just the number one piece of advice that I have. And I look at all these Kickstarters, I look at Kickstarter all the time looking for good stuff. And there's stuff with it I just think has outrageous asks for money, or they like, I'm going to do a photography book and it's going to be, $160. And I'm like,
no one's going to buy your $160 book.
I'm not going to pay $160 for a photography book. I might pay $50 for a photography book. So I think that's it. Like, but it's autographed. And I'm like, yeah, but you're nobody, or I'll send you an autographed postcard. And I'm like, I really don't want an autographed postcard.
Yeah.
So I think having having a thing that people want is important. So your rewards are super important, right? And your main reward should be at an affordable price. And there should also be some things that people can back if they like your thing. Like they don't want the thing, they just want to help you do the thing. Like I helped somebody make a doll once. It's like I didn't want the doll, I just wanted her to be able to make this doll so that kids could have the doll. So having something like that is important. Not being too expensive is important.
Yeah, and I think with this, we really tried to cross-pollinate as much as possible as well, with different circles of people that are in our lives. We have, friends in the fantasy world, and the editor of Enchanted Living magazine, and we really tried to make it to get the word out in as many circles as we could.
That's another misconception a lot of people have about crowdfunding things. Like, in order to crowdfund something, first you need a crowd.
Yeah,
it's not like you saying, I'm going to crowdfund this thing and the crowd shows up. Like, you have to bring the crowd to the thing.
Yeah, I think
that's all the. Oh, go on.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say that the self-promotion thing is very difficult for some people, or they just don't know how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I have an idea about this, which I've had for a long time, which is like, you create the beast, you feed the beast, and then eventually the beast feeds you when you need it to, and a lot of times for us, feeding the beast is just posting cat pictures, and being engaging and, trying to be kind. And so that you have people who are paying attention when, you're doing something. You're like, oh, I have this project, and they've been following along because they like they like cat pictures or whatever.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Kyle, you did a great thing with this particular Kickstarter in eliciting opinions from your Facebook friends. Like, would you be like asking people if they'd be interested in a certain reward, or what cover image do they prefer? And it got people involved in talking about it before the Kickstarter even went live.
I think everybody wants to be part of a great adventure, and if you just invite them along, they're very happy to be there.
The moment I saw this project, I kicked in my money, and then 5 minutes later, I asked you if you'd be interested in doing this. So yeah, I'm okay. All along for the ride. My one question, since you did just hit the goal right before we started, got some good stretch goals in place?
Yeah. So the first thing is augmenting Lizzie's chapbook. So I want to give her the book that she never had when she was alive. I want her book to look beautiful and to make a book that she would be proud to see on a shelf next to those of her peers at the time. So if you have an 1860 edition of the poems of Tennyson, I want this book to look very nice right next to it. So to do that, we're going to spend some time with some experts in Victorian books and Victorian bookbinding. And we're going to look at some things that make some of those books really interesting and special. And we're also talking right now with designers. So one of the things we could have done is there are collections of Victorian ornaments. So a lot of the Victorian books that you see have a frontispiece that's almost mass produced. So somebody makes, 14 of them for a printer, and they say, we're going to use this one in the Tennyson book. And a lot of these exist. There are hundreds of them. So you could just get one that already exists, one that was made in the 1880s or 1860s, and use it in your book. But we want to do a new one. We want to do a custom one for Lizzie. So that's what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Looking at, can we make a book that has a debossed image in it? So the cover, instead of being embossed, has an indent in it, and can we put a picture in there? And can we use gold foil on the cover? Can we have gilt edges? Can we put a bookmark in it? Can we put a tissue paper protector between the frontispiece? Can we get permission from the Ashmolean Library to reprint one of the manuscript pages of her poem? So those are things that we're looking into right now.
Jeez, I now I feel bad about the one that I was thinking of proposing. So I will get back to you about some of my stretch goals down the line for my project. But this sounds fantastic. And again, having seen the proofs that you sent over, it's a gorgeous project. I'm so glad you guys got this rolling.
Oh,
so
thank you.
I will do my best to push you guys beyond all stretch goals. And I hope we're able to sit down again sometime soon and talk photography, modeling, acting, and all the other stuff I didn't get to, including the weird Hasselblad camera that you refer to.
Oh my gosh. I can't wait to talk about that sometime.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, guys. Good luck with the Kickstarter, and I will keep pushing people along on social about it.
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to talk to you, Gil.
Yes, so appreciate it. This was lovely. Thank you.
And that was Trillian Stars and Kyle Cassidy and Lizzie Siddle. Go check out their Kickstarter, This Is Only Earth, My Dear, Poems and Photos. If you're listening to this before May 4th, 2024, go pledge. The project looks amazing. The photographs are absolutely gorgeous. The poetry, it's intriguing, and I'm into this whole project. You can find the Kickstarter by searching for Kyle Cassidy on the site. He is the listed creator for it, but I'll also have links in the show and episode notes for this, along with links to their sites and their social media feeds. Kyle is one of the few people who remains active on LiveJournal, as was Dean Haspiel, my previous bonus episode guest. It's kind of weird how that happens. But anyway, I respect them both for that. His site has a lot of neat photography and links to all the other books that he's made, so you can go check that stuff out. And I'll be back in a day or two with this week's regular episode of the show, which features a conversation with Emily Rabbitoe. Thanks for listening to this bonus episode of the Virtual Memories Show.